In 1965, the United States had limited involvement in Vietnam. After Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution in 1964, the number of troops in Vietnam increased drastically to fight communist sentiments under Ho Chi Minh. In 1965, the role of media in the United States changed to expose new truths to the American public. The catalyst for this change, Morley Safer and his Cam Ney report. Development of television, media took on a new shape. Like the automobile, it soon became a common household item across the United States.
A lot of television in those days was programmed for the entire family because the premise was that the whole family would watch the one set. So as families gathered around in their living rooms and watched their television sets, for the first time in maybe world history, you had the whole family, including the children, looking at images of war. They were seeing things that were more graphic by the late 1960s and seeing them in color than had ever happened before.
With a more mobile camera, it became easier to shoot footage of the war, bring the atrocities of Vietnam into the public's living room. In 1965, Morley Safer, a young reporter assigned to Vietnam, painted a new picture of the U.S.'s role in the conflict.
This is what the war in Vietnam is all about.
Exposing the search and destroy mission of the 9th Marines in a small string of rural villages outside Da Nang called Cam Ney, Safer's report featured Marines storming the homes of women, children, and elderly. They were shown lighting the thatched roofs on fire with cigarette lighters and flamethrowers.
Shortly after, an officer told me he had orders to go in and level the string of hamlets that surrounds Cam Ney village.
Aired nationally on CBS, this report sparked a new era in media associated with the Vietnam War.
To a Vietnamese peasant whose home means a lifetime of backbreaking labor, it will take more than presidential promises to convince him that we are on his side. Morley Safer, CBS News, near the village of Cam Ney.
Both the public and the Johnson administration were outraged by the released footage. The federal government feared the negative image it gave the war effort and the resulting loss of public support. Immediately following the report, Johnson directly called the president of CBS, insisting that he and his boys had shat on the American flag.
And he was pretty plain, pretty brutal, that they were going to go to every end to discredit us, because he felt we were going to every end to discredit them.
Though equally outraged, the public directed their anger towards the federal government for its apparent belligerent actions in Vietnam.
They were covering up a lot, too. They weren't truthful. Right. They really weren't, you know. The things that were going on over there, they weren't really telling the truth for stateside.
Demonstrators protest U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War in mass marches, rallies, and demonstrations. Central Park is the starting point for the parade to the UN building. The estimated 125,000 Manhattan marchers include students, housewives, beatnik poets, doctors, businessmen, teachers, priests, and nuns.
Prior to the Cam Ney report, there had been limited opposition to the war, which included draft card burnings in the early 1960s, school protests by the student groups such as the SDS, and other public demonstrations. Following 1965 and the Cam Ney report, anti-war sentiment greatly increased, resulting in a rapid advancement in demonstrations around the country.
It was actually on TV a lot, I understand, in the States. But we were finding out the protest that was going on here, where the guys were burning their drafts and going to Canada. We were over there and we were doing our duty like we were supposed to, but a lot of them, we used to talk amongst ourselves, wondering, you know, what are we doing, guys? You know, I mean, we knew that there was a lot of riots going on in the States, and so why are we still here?
Refusal to fight in Vietnam spurred mainly from the new public opinion that the U.S.'s actions overseas were immoral.
And Cam Ney is very much the start of that idea of, showing things that do not show our forces in a heroic light. They show them as practically war criminals.
1965 was a pivotal year in the war. With Johnson's new Operation Rolling Thunder, U.S. involvement escalated, resulting in increased media coverage of the war. The Cam Ney report's release coincided with this boost, leading the way for new exposing footage of American troops. As the war progressed, the use of cameras increased and the use of media increased.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's been, and more there was a big outcry in the States.
Starting in 1965, an increase in media regarding military actions in Vietnam took place, arousing a new public awareness of the atrocities committed by our boys for the rest of the war.
There were the so-called doves, whose position was, well, just quote the most extreme of them, Anthony Lewis of the New York Times, the best-known, most extreme critic. He wrote that the war began with blundering efforts to do good, but by 1969 it was clear that it was a mistake and a disaster.
With the public's increased interest in the war, the magnitude of anti-war sentiments skyrocketed, peaking in 1968 with the publication of the My Lai massacre, an exposure of U.S. troops killing apparently innocent civilians without a reason. The report focused on the killing of women and children.
Families had a lot of arguments. I know my family did. We all watched the news, but we all drew different conclusions from it. And it mostly broke down on generational lines. My father, who was a World War II veteran, usually took the position that the war was a good thing and we could win it if we would only try harder. And most of the kids in the family, especially as we approached draft age, thought it was a terrible mistake and that there was no good outcome. And the best thing we could do would be to leave as soon as possible.
The new coverage of the war was extremely controversial, especially among the generation gap. The young generation was greatly influenced by the new media, and reports such as Camnay came to define the new counterculture of the 1960s.
We didn't question anything, but the other group, they questioned, and they protested all the time. There was protest all the time. But a couple of guys that I was in my outfit, when they came home, they actually went to D.C., and they got their NAM medals and everything, and they threw them over.
For the first time in history, the masses were seeing war through a soldier's eyes.
And I was seeing stuff on that front page about the war that was quite, upsetting. I remember seeing some of the pictures from the Tet Offensive in 1968. I, to this day, can remember the original publication, the photo of it's often referred to as the Napalm Girl, 1972, yeah. Kim Phuc.
This new exposition of the horrors of the war created the dominant public opinion and established the new role of media as the primary source of uncensored information to the people.
Vietnam was the combination of incredibly bad behavior and very unyielding, unblinking coverage of that bad behavior. That was, I think, the unprecedented new thing about Vietnam. Well,
after his revolutionary report on Camnay in 1965, Morley Safer sparked the beginnings of a new era in media coverage regarding the uncensored exposition of the truth and its involvement in forming public opinion.
Is it alright if we ask you some questions on the Camnay report?
On the what?
On the Camnay report.
Just media.
I don't know what that